Violent incidents linked to the war in Iran now. Shots fired at the US consulate in Toronto, Canada. The Canadian authorities describe it as unacceptable. And improvised explosives are going off near America's consulate in Oslo, Norway. This took place on Sunday. Meanwhile, in New York, 2 men have been charged with terrorism after throwing a homemade bomb at anti-Islam protesters over the weekend. And Europol, which is Europe's cross-border police force, is warning that the Middle East conflict will have immediate repercussions for European Union security, with an increased threat of terrorism, serious and organised crime, as well as violent extremism and cyber attacks.
Has Iran activated so-called sleeper cells in Western countries to retaliate for the killing of the country's supreme leader? Concerns about that possibility are growing. This week, a federal government alert was sent to law enforcement agencies in the United States. According to the message, the US intercepted encrypted communications believed to have originated in Iran.
It's possible the transmissions could be intended to activate or provide instructions to pre-position sleeper assets operating outside the originating country.
The alert does not link the threat to a specific location, but it instructs law enforcement agencies to increase monitoring. So far, the Trump administration has offered few details about the level of any potential threat from terrorists or spies working undercover. When asked whether Iran had activated such cells in the US, President Donald Trump did not directly answer the question, but he said he's aware of their existence. Trump also blamed a partial shutdown of the Department of Homeland Security, which he says is limiting the government's ability to respond.
Well, they've been trying for a long time. We've been very much on top of it. One of the things we have to do is get the Democrats to stop the Democrat shutdown.
Fears that Iran could use sleeper cells intensified earlier this month after a gunman opened fire at a bar in Austin, Texas, killing 3 people. Investigators say there are indicators of possible terrorism.
Iran is saying that it will end the war on its terms when it wants to. And of course, one of the issues is how that war will be continued. Our report pointing out that there are many ways for war to be waged. And one of them, of course, is that very insidious way of hidden terror cells across the world. Let's bring in Graig Klein to talk more about this, Assistant Professor in Terrorism and Political Violence at Leiden University in The Hague. Greg, great to see you. Thanks for joining us here in France 24. We're looking forward to your insight on this story because clearly what Iran might have in mind may be very far from the realms of conventional warfare.
Yes, thank you for having me. As some of the stories they were just showing, Iran has networks throughout the world. We know they have some of their proxy terrorist groups in the Middle East, like Hamas and Hezbollah, that are active there. But here in Europe, there's a greater concern about organized crime, the criminal networks, and individuals or sleeper cells that may have been placed in some of these countries that are awaiting activation to target a lot of what Iranian kind of strategic political violence and extremism and terrorism looks like in Europe and what it's looked like for several years. They like to target Jewish communities, they like to target government representatives, and oftentimes they use this through criminal organizations as essentially political violence for hire.
You mentioned organized crime. What kind of flesh can you put on those bones? Are we thinking of things like the sale of drugs, the sale of illicit contraband? What are we talking about?
It leverages organizations that participate in those kind of activities, but it's more so looking at essentially short transactions with these types of organized crime that might specialize in violence, may have networks to individuals who are willing to commit acts of violence for a monetary benefit. And so we see this some where there's been links between the Foxtrot organized crime group in Sweden and Iran. We've seen this in the past with former Hells Angels members actually traveling to Iran and then back to Germany to recruit people to perpetrate attacks. In that case, in Germany, it was against a synagogue. But it's not so much about the drug trade per se, but it's that these are individuals who have networks and access to weapons, are willing to commit acts of violence, and these can be short transactions between the Iranian regime or its assets and potential perpetrators in Western countries.
Greg, is this about people who are moved ideologically, or is it purely about financial gain?
There can be a little bit of both. I think the potential terrorist attack in Austin maybe something linked to ideological gain. We have to keep in mind that the assassinated Ayatollah is a martyr for some of the cause and some ideological gains there. But there are also people doing this for financial benefit. There are people who are also doing this because they might have other political leanings or believe in extremism to an extent that they're willing to commit acts of violence. And it takes some of this network to kind of push them over the edge or incentivize them, sometimes through monetary gain.
What we don't want is for this interview, excuse me, what we don't want, Greg, is for this interview to make people think when they see someone who may be Iranian or may look Iranian or somehow they feel is Iranian, they might be hidden agents or something. That's not what it's about, because the way this works is that you wouldn't know, would you, if you were living among someone who was planning this kind of thing?
No, I think that's part of the struggle in terms of security, both from a government perspective and from society, and being able to be resilient and not being suspicious of our neighbors and people that we're living with. Most of these assets who would be placed here are likely already working in Iranian embassies. They're usually not going to be members of the Iranian community. In fact, oftentimes these networks or assets that are here, or those that are hired through criminal organizations, are actually targeting Iranian dissidents. And they're going after journalists, and they're going after people that the Iranian regime sees as enemies and rivals. And that can be Iranians themselves, especially those who have led different protest movements or have been very active dissidents, either within Iran before they left or are now living abroad.
How far does this network stretch, Craig?
It would be hard to say, but it is an international network. Like I mentioned earlier, there's been examples out of Sweden and in Germany. We know that the Dutch intelligence agency has released reports. There's a 2024 report that specifically identifies some perpetrators that were connected to organized crime that may have also been associated with a political assassination in Spain. And we saw U.S. intelligence agencies and security giving a warning that there may have been some encrypted messaging released that maybe is there to activate some potential sleeper cells outside of Iran.
Looking back, just researching from 1979 to the present day, the number of plots and intelligence operations that may or may not have been attached to Iran, it does go across the world. I'm thinking back to 1992, the attack on the Israeli embassy in Buenos Aires, 29 people killed in that one. You know the list better than I do, I'm sure. But what I'm thinking is, when Donald Trump says he's not concerned about any of this, is that kind of complacent of the US president, do you think?
I think it is complacent. I think this is particularly complacent given there's already been some violent events inside the United States and targeting US embassies abroad. We know that this is part of the Iranian strategic playbook. We know that they've been doing this, like you've said, since 1979. We know they do this in many countries around the world. It's not only their known terrorist networks and axis of resistance in the Middle East region, but that they have these networks built in around the world. They have assets already placed, and that they are willing to engage in this type of violence that is trying to undercut state security, try to build civil discord, try to turn neighbors against neighbors, that this is part of their strategic playbook in how they're going to operate, especially when they are outgunned and potentially as this drags on to a longer and longer war.
So this is a kind of subversive war of attrition, something which is in the shadows, something which is sort of something that many governments and many authorities won't see coming. When it happens, it may well be too late. The fact of the matter now, though, is that many places, and our own studios included, have armed police outside, just in case. France has stepped up its Operation Sentinelle security, which has been in place since 2015, to a higher level because of what is happening in Iran right now. And I imagine across the world, this is being repeated.
Absolutely. There is heightened security. We know that this is a potential threat, and we know that there's been more assets, both financial and kind of labor that's gone into this to try to better securitize those who are particularly vulnerable to this, which oftentimes is going to be Iranian dissidents, journalists, and potentially Jewish communities or symbols throughout Europe. The challenge to this, though, is as a security agency, you are expected to essentially prevent and stop everything. And as Iran or other terrorists, they only have to be successful once to accomplish some of their goals. So it creates this dilemma of, even within heightened security, it's almost impossible to be able to know everything and have everything there. And so we have to be more aware and dedicate more and more resources to understanding what this potential Iranian threat looks like.
How great, Graig, is the cyber element of this, the possibility of cyber attacks? How great is this?
Oh, Iran is very good in the cyber offense, very good at cyber attacks. I'm sure that there have been plenty of banks, financial institutions that have already faced an increase in attacks from Iran. We know, or at least there's reports, that Iran and China have been working together a little bit and sharing some information in the background of this conflict. And we also know that these countries are quite active in terms of their cyber capabilities and cyber offense.
So what is your advice to ordinary people, apart from stay at home and don't talk to anybody and never go online? We can't do that with our lives, obviously, but what is the basic advice, sir?
I think the basic advice is this is something to be aware of and know that this threat exists. But I think there's also something to say about societal resilience, and that we cannot look suspiciously at one another. We can't look suspiciously at people that we think present a potential threat. And that we have to realize that this is going to be part of our kind of day-to-day reality right now, at least as long as this conflict is going on. And to just be extra vigilant, especially in kind of the cyber domain. Be careful with passwords, be careful with your activity online. We know that things are going to be targeted and vulnerable.
Graig Klein, pleasure speaking to you, sir. Thank you very much indeed for that illuminating insight into what might happen next in terms of Iran's plans to continue hostility. Graig Klein is Assistant Professor in Terrorism and Political Violence at Leiden University in The Hague. Thank you, sir, for joining us. Great to see you.
For having me.